truck rattling on the section road a mile to the east. Nonetheless, I had rolled from my bed, my heart thumping with hope, before his face in the photo on the dresser spoke more loudly than he had ever in life. Panmunjom. But his daughter, my granddaughter, had asked me the day before why my parents had died within 3 days of each other back in February in 1910. Dalva is a scant 11 years of age and was curious, I suppose, because an October storm had threshed off the leaves of the lilac grove wherein we had our family cemetery, and she became mindful again of those buried, including her father, though there is no body there, the remains of which still rest on a snowy mountain hillside in South Korea. In any event, when I thrust myself out of bed so violently, my heart became tremulous, literally shaking in its sack, and I had the direst sense of mortality I have ever experienced, short of my youthful scrapes with physical violence in Arizona, Mexico, and France, not to speak of 2 drunken louts I pitched into the East River in New York back in 1913 after a nasty struggle. Brushes with death are so memorable you can still see the pores in the face of the immediate enemy decades later. Now, no one asks a more serious question than an 11-year-old, and they deserve to be answered in kind, inasmuch as they are attentive to a painful degree, waiting for an answer rather than mentally concocting their next question. Usually she asks the same or similar questions about the horses of the past, liking familiar stories. How in 1934 did Lundquist and I feed up a Belgian stallion until he weighed 2,800 pounds, purportedly the largest in the country, if not the world at that time. But why my parents died within 3 days of each other could not be answered with because they were sick and heartbroken with age and illness. The event had to be encapsulated in a story, and not a simple one at that. At 11, she was already reading Dickens and the Bronte sisters, and a reality painted in careless pastels would not be sufficient. Another event, albeit strange, had occurred the week before, and deeply unsettled me. Lundquist and I had made a 3-hour drive to the west and north to hunt my remaining English setter, Tess, very likely the last bird hunt for both of us, she being 12, and my knowing for a year that when Tess was gone this game would be over in this life. We had left before dawn and reached our first spot near Parmalee across the border in South Dakota, from whence we intended to travel onward to Gordon to visit some coverts where the dog had had her best day many years before. Bird dogs are fond of revisiting scenes of early happiness, just as we are. Lundquist grumbled about the Parmalee area as expected. 3 members of his family, or so he maintained, had lost their lives in the New Ulm massacre in Minnesota nearly 100 years before, and he was fearful of the Lakota. Tess pointed a sharp-tailed grouse that I flushed, shot, but only crippled, and then we floundered in sedge and spike rush for a half-hour, damning Lundquist, who had wandered off as if following a distant star at mid-morning. Tess repointed the wounded bird, unwilling to dispose of it, so gentle was her disposition. I grasped it by the neck and broke it, feeling the fragile vertebrae crush beneath my thumb. For some reason I kissed the bird, then dizzied and stooped to my haunches long enough to concern the dog, an old man half-kneeling in a bog, saying goodbye to the hunt after a half-century, is a melancholy portrait indeed. Bringing the bird back to life was a casual and sentimental impulse, not the less absurd for being so heartfelt. In this grim world there is more sentimentality about killing than motherhood. When I stood up and headed back to the car, the day that had begun sunny and warmish for mid-October had turned gray and cool, with the wind beginning to bluster out of the northwest. My heart, that had been so eager